Hey guys, it's Sasa, and I'll be going over the jungle tier list for this patch, but also I'm taking into consideration the next patch that's coming up because there's been a preview of that patch, and there's not a whole lot of changes, so don't worry, it's going to be nothing major. But this will be the most up-to-date patch at the time that I am posting this. All you need to know is that it is going to be directed towards anyone lower than Master tier, and it is also going to assume that you have some sort of basic proficiency over the champion. For example, if you see here, I have Ivern as the best champion, best jungler in the game. But if you've never played Ivern before, I wouldn't recommend you just randomly picking up Ivern. It's more so like, hey, maybe you've played him before, maybe you play him a certain way, but maybe you would consider picking him back up if you want to climb, if you want to gain some LP, which brings me on to my next point, is that this is a tier list for climbing and gaining LP. It's not a tier list like one that I made previously for learning how to play jungle. This is strictly for MMR and LP gains. And the last thing I'll say is that the left to right does matter, especially for Z and S and some of the A tier champions. So what I mean by that is like Ivern is on the left here, so he's the best. Then Mundo is after that, and then Zin, and then Trundle, Warwick, so you get the point. Alright, let's move straight onto my boy Ivern. So, I love Ivern. I love AP Ivern. I think that this is probably the best time. It's been a very good time to be playing Ivern because ever since they made it to where he has better AP scalings on Daisy, AP Ivern has just been very dominant. The reason why it's really good to pick AP Ivern up, because the biggest weakness Ivern had was that he was traditionally not seen as a low elo jungler, because while he can just simply play like a support, turns out it's very difficult to play like a support when your teammates suck and they don't know how to end the game. But you can play AP Ivern, so you yourself can just take objectives, you can push towers, you can do everything. And what I do on my most optimal Ivern loadout is I go airy, because the amount of numbers, the amount of damage, not just damage, shielding, just the numbers you pump out is quite insane. If you think about it, you have your W passive, red buff, plus area on your auto attacks, you're actually doing a decent amount of damage. Shielding as well. Your Daisy procs it on auto attacks. It's quite good. And then it also lets you go into the sorcery tree where you can get Axiom Arcanist, where your ultimate deals 7% extra damage and its cooldown is reduced every time you get a kill while your ultimate is on cooldown. Then you have Transcendence, simply just the better option out of the three. And you also love Ability Haste on Ivern, which I'll explain in a second. Then you have Gathering Storm, because it's the best out of the three, and Ivern likes scaling into the late. Oh, you don't want to go to the late game, but if you do, you need to ensure that you are in fact scaling, and you're not falling off. Then you have Domination Secondary, where you're going to take Cheap Shot. Obviously, this is really good, because he has a lot of ways to impair movement. However, you could replace this with the one that gives cooldown reduction to Trinkets. I don't know the name, but I think it's more so a playstyle difference if you do choose to go down that route. And then you have Ultimate Hunter, because you want to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate, since it is OP, potentially one of the strongest ultimates in the game. Then for your runes, you go Ability Haste, because you don't need Ability Power, right? A lot of people need Ability Power and attack damage because they need to clear faster, right? Ivern doesn't need damage to clear, so Ability Haste is actually more valuable because you can tick down your ultimate much quicker, for example. It can be the difference between getting 2 shields off in one fight, or 1 shield off. That being said, you go move speed secondary, because again, you don't need damage. In fact, physically being faster directly makes your clear speed faster as Ivern. And as well, move speed is just a really, really powerful stat, especially on junglers, because of how frequently they need to walk around the map. Then you take scaling health, because it's just better than flat health. You're going to take blue pet, as you would with almost any other jungler. It has extra benefits with Ivern, since he can make his bushes. On your first back, you're generally going to have 900 gold, so you want to get CDR boots. If you get a kill, you can actually get CDR boots and Dark Seal, which is just a very optimal, very good starting, like first back. Now, as your first item, it's really going to be playstyle dependent. Malignance means you get your ultimate up faster. Lichbane means you don't get it up as often, right? But when it is up, it's stronger. And when I say is, I'm referring to Daisy. I personally like Malignance. I feel as though as you learn matchups and you learn how to absolutely just dominate matchups with Daisy, then having your ultimate up very frequently is very, very oppressive. For example, if you're fighting a Zin, right? If you don't have your ultimate, you're just free food for the Zin. But if you do have your ultimate, he's free food for you. So once you learn how to use your ultimate better, and you realize you don't necessarily need the damage early on, then you can just get Malignance, get your ultimate up faster, or more frequently, and then just go around killing people, take objectives. It also got a free 10 AP, which is great. Lichbane also got buffed, and Deathcap got buffed. He was building these items anyway, that's why Ivern is just even better, because the items he was building are just even better now. You always want to go, so whichever one you don't get, you'll build second. So Malignance into Lichbane, or Lichbane into Malignance. Third one, you're always going to want to go Deathcap. The reason for this is because a lot of people start to come very, very strong at 3 items. Think of AD carries, mages, even some top laners and junglers, right? So if you're building something like Liandry's, which isn't giving you a lot of AP compared to Deathcap, your Daisy is actually going to die very quickly. And if your Daisy is dying very quickly, then why are you playing AP Ivern instead of just playing support Ivern, right? Deathcap gives you that flat AP, and it enables your Daisy to actually scale into the late game. Then you can go Cosmic if you want CDR. You can go Crypt Bloom if they have magic resistance. You can go Horizon Focus even if you want. You go Zhonya's if they have dive. You can even consider going Cosmic as a second item, potentially, or even as a first item, if you value the health, because maybe you're versing an assassin jungler, like Kayn or Zed, and you need the extra health to survive. But otherwise, it's pretty flexible after you get Deathcap. Okay, so for our second strongest jungler of the patch, we have Dr. Mundo. I think this guy has been underrated for very long. His actual power levels are good. He's actually just a good jungler, strong jungler in his own right. But I think where a lot of his power comes from, that is very, like, yet to be realized, is the fact that he fixes a lot of team comps. I know that in lower ranks, you get a lot of, like, mage supports, right? So you might have a team like Jhin, Vel'Koz bot lane, with a Ahri mid and an Akshan top. And now you're like, well, I need to pick a tank. And most people think Zac, Mumu, these kind of champs. But then you're like, well, I have triple AP now. It's not really a good damage spread. Well, Dr. Mundo is great because he's an AD tank. He's the only AD tank, which is good because he's also coincidentally the best tank in the game. Conceptually, the reason why Mundo jungle, I guess Mundo is very good, is because let's take a jungler like Jarvan, for example, right? Whenever you back, you have to decide, do I want to buy a longsword or a ruby crystal, right? A ruby crystal is going to give you more value because you're spending more gold, right? It's 400 instead of 350. So it's going to be better in an all-in fight. But then, because you don't go longsword, you actually lack damage. And when you go longsword, you have damage which gives you clear speed. You can take objectives faster. You can potentially just get kills that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. But it's constantly a choice that you have to make, right? I think of AP junglers, you have to choose between getting a ruby crystal or an amplifying tome. The thing about Mundo is he just buys tank items, and his clear speed scales with that. His Q does a large amount of current health damage of the monster you're hitting, so that's always going to scale. But his E is going to give you damage based off of how much health you have. So you literally can just buy Giant's Belts, Ruby Crystals, or whatever, and not feel bad at all, because your clear speed is not going to be affected. With that being said, on your first buy, you're going to have around 900 gold, like I said. You can just straight up buy a Giant's Belt. And then it doesn't even matter. You can even not buy the Giant's Belt. You can just do a second rotation, and your clear speed's still going to be pretty decent. So, before we get into his items, let's get into his runes. So you're going to go Fleet, mainly because he doesn't really have any other good runes, to be honest. But he actually gets quite low when he clears the jungle. So Fleet's really good for that, and it makes it so he has... his likelihood of being able to get on top of people is higher because he has this. You go Triumph because it's the best rune out of the 3. You go Haste here because you don't actually care about the attack speed. You just want to rotate between your Q and your E and get them off as often as possible. And then you go Coup de Grace here because your Q does current health damage, which means it's good at getting people low. But once they are low on health, it actually doesn't do a lot. And so getting this to be able to finish people off with your E is a lot more effective than the other options. So then you go Inspiration Secondary, and you get free boots and Approach Velocity. So Approach Velocity is good because you can just straight up run faster towards people. Because you can. It just gives you a flat % increase to running towards people. But then even more so if they're impaired. So if they are already impaired by someone else, or if you throw your Q, not only are you slowing them, but you're also running faster at them. It's very hard for them to get away from you. The reason you take free boots is because you just want to rush Heartsteel as fast as possible. So as you can see here, you go Giant Spelt first recall, rush Heartsteel, and then you complete your boots. You go attack speed here for your clear and for your fighting, and then you go double scaling because, again, you don't need the adaptive force. You just need extra health of this guy. Like I said, Swifties, unless they have like full AD or they have a lot of stuns, you're pretty much just going to go Swifties. If you can get the feats, it's even better. It's such a strong upgrade. Then secondary, you're either going to go Deadman's or Spirit Visage. If they have mostly AD, go Deadman's. The extra move speed is great, especially on junglers. The extra damage on hit is great. Synergize with Heartsteel. Spirit Visage is obviously really good. Gives insane value to his ultimate. So if they're more magic resist focused, you could build this. If they have equal damage spread, I would go Deadman's first because I enjoy the extra move speed. I think it's very, very OP for junglers. And then I'd go Spirit Visage, and then you go Overlord's Bloodmail fourth. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, why not Titanic? Simply, I looked at the numbers. Overlord's Bloodmail outperforms Titanic at every point in the game. Like, pretty considerably as well. But with that being said, Titanic is still a good item. Overlord just outperforms it. It's probably because Jungle Mundo, you don't need the actual clear. You don't need the cleave, as you would with Lane Mundo. But even still, this just outperforms it. And then I go Ghost as well. I think it's important to understand his ultimate. A lot of habits that bad Mundo players have is they will pop their ultimate to chase people because it gives move speed. This makes you actually very squishy. You're actually very squishy without your ultimate. You really want to save your ultimate and pop it when you're low on health, and you're just unkillable for that duration. And so having Ghost is a good bridge to this. It essentially means you can just chase people without having to commit your ultimate. And I find having Flash of Mundo is quite awkward to use. So having Ghost is just a pretty good substitute here. Okay, so onto our third Z tier champion, we have Xin. And if you've noticed, the Z tier champions actually have quite a variety. You have AP in Ivern, you have Tank in Mundo, and then you have a Bruiser in Xin. So if you can somehow play all three of these champions, then if you just rotate between them based on what kind of draft you have, you'll have a good champion to play, like every draft pretty much. So it is a very good combination for climbing. That being said, the reason Xin is on here is a large chunk of that reason is because he honestly has a really good matchup into, if you look here, into most meta or like decent junglers, like popular junglers, let's say. Vi used to be a lot more popular. Vi, I'm assuming, will be less popular after the nerfs, but she has a really good matchup into Vi, Viego, Jarvan, Diana, like, you know, these common kind of junglers. I mean, he also has a good matchup into Ivern and Mundo, just depending on like player diff. You can even play it into theoretical counter matchups like Trundle, for example. Even Kha'Zix I've played it into. He can function really, really well. And the reason why is because, I don't know if this is like cheating, but I'm talking about enchanters in. So when you pair him up with an enchanter like Lulu or Milio, this guy is one of the strongest champions in the game, right? If you play with an engage or mage support, he definitely loses a lot more value. He's still a strong champion though. I'd say Xin Zhao with an enchanter is Z tier. Without an enchanter, he's probably still an S tier champion. He gets so much value from being paired up with an enchanter. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth into it now. But yeah, he gets a lot of value with these kinds of picks. So if you see someone hovering in Lulu or Milio, I would just go Xin. So basically, you're going to go a very traditional like skirmisher setup, right? You go Conqueror. Don't go Lethal Tempo. The reason why is because Conqueror is going to make your W, your ultimate, do like way more damage. And Lethal Tempo is just, yeah, you're not going to be like just constantly auto-attacking till you die, right? Like you actually do weave in quite a lot of spells. Triumph, pretty standard. You go Alacrity, of course, you prefer the attack speed. You go Last Stand because you're going to be spending a decent amount of time in low health. Or like lower health thresholds, which is, again, good synergy with an enchanter that can keep you alive. Then you go attack speed, damage, scaling health, and then you essentially just run this, like, I call it like a fast tempo setup. You get free boots and Cosmic Insight. Free boots because it essentially just allows you to buy a dagger or a longsword for free, because you don't have to buy boots. And then with Cosmic Insight, you get your flash up faster, which means you can trade flashes aggressively, and your smite comes up quicker, which kind of means you can jungle faster, right? So, because you have free boots, you can just rush straight into your Triforce. I personally love Triforce. I think it's really good. The attack speed makes these champions feel much smoother to play. the attack speed plus the Sheen proc makes clearing faster, and especially taking objectives. So Death's Dragon, but also taking stuff like towers is much faster, and your dueling potential is still very, very good. Then you're generally going to go, I mean, obviously boots are situational, but generally you get Merc Treads because Zin's biggest weakness is dying within a stun, because he'll usually be the first one to go in, especially if you have an enchanter. So if you go in first and you don't get your ultimate off, you'll just die. But if you go in first and get your ultimate off, you won't be dying for the next 5 seconds. And then you can just kill whoever you've dashed in on and no one else can do anything to you. Then you're going to want to go Sundered Sky. This is just generally going to be the best for Zin's playstyle. He's not like I guess like Jarvan, you kind of want to like EQ to knock someone up. You want to kite and then wait for your next EQ, right? Zin just kind of goes in there. He wants to stay in there. And this item helps him do that best. Third item is going to be very situational. If they have a lot of like stuns and burst, I will go Sterax for the tenacity and the shield. If they have a lot of stuns and a lot of AP, I'll go Wit's End for the tenacity and the magic resist. Or if they have a lot of armor, I'll go Black Cleaver. If I'm really far ahead, I'll just go GA because I have like a 1,000 gold shutdown. Zin is a champion that kind of has to go in, right? So it's not unlikely that you'll die, which means GA is actually pretty good because you can at least take 1 or 2 people with you. You revive from the GA, the fight's probably over, you save your shutdown. It's pretty good. And then yeah, you purchase a standard blue smite, or blue pet, sorry, with Smite Flash. Okay, now back to the tier list. We're going to go to our S tier champions, and unfortunately, I can't go in depth with these champions as much as I did the Z tier champions because I don't want this video to go on forever. But I could do more longer form content like that in the future if people are interested. So you have Trundle. This guy has sort of just popped up. Nothing's really changed with him. People started to realize that he has good matchups into the meta junglers. For example, he's very good into tanks because of his ultimate, right? Well, one of the best junglers in this patch right now is Dr. Mundo, right? Dr. Mundo also, he's good into champions like, for example, if Nocturne tries to fear him, he can just run away with his passive, right? Trundle just has a perpetual slow on his E, so it's actually hard for Mundo to escape. He's also, like I said, Trundle just also has good matchups to any tank jungler because he can steal their resistances. But he also has good matchups into bruiser/dueling junglers because his Q steals their attack damage. For example, people started picking him up in competitive because he is a good counter in theory to Zen. He used to also traditionally be a good counter into champions like Olaf or Volibear, who are traditionally very strong duelists because of his Q. So he just has a lot of really good matchups, and that's why people are playing him. I think he's worth picking up if you've played him before. Warwick, he's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The things that he's good at, right? So he's good at dueling, and he's very easy to pilot. And that's very important in low rank. So while he may not be good at a lot of things, the things that he is good at is very important, or can be abused a lot, or you can crutch it. You can rely on it a lot. Then you have Nocturne. Speaking of relying on crutches, this guy just farms to level 6. Every time he has his ultimate up, he uses it and he ganks, and that's kind of his crutch. And it's very simple, very one-dimensional, very easy to rely on. Ulting someone, you can throw your Q as you're about to land from your ultimate, and then you land your E. If you have Stride Breaker, they can't get away. I mean, just super solid, right? Kill people on side lanes, kill people when they overextend. Then you have Nunu. Nunu kind of just crutches his snowball mechanic. It essentially enables him to gank from any angle. A lot of people just are not good at jungle tracking, and even if they were, Nunu would still be hard to find because he can do 3 camps and gank pretty frequently. He also goes like Liandry's Sunfire or Liandry's Deadman, something like that. The one downside of Nunu is that his dueling is very weak, which is not a good attribute to have as jungler. What you can do is you can just simply, if someone is invading your bot side jungle, for example, you don't have to fight them. You can just invade their top side jungle, right? Or conversely, you can just not fight them. I think the mistake Nunu players make is they're weak at dueling, but they try to fight when they're being invaded, and in doing so they die, and then they end up losing more than they would have. What I mean is, you don't have to die for your camps as Nunu. Because you're a tank, and because your snowball gives your team a lot of value, it's okay to go down a couple camps because you really don't need as much gold as, say, for example, a Zin or a Diana, right? You just simply don't need as much gold. So it's okay to lose some of your camps because you have a weak, 1v1. With that being said, we have the opposite end of the spectrum, Briar, where she has a good 1v1, very one-dimensional, very easy to pilot, and I think a lot of her weaknesses just aren't very exploitable at lower ranks. Yeah, very one-dimensional champ, very straightforward. Kind of like Warwick, not good at a lot of things, but what she is good at is very useful in lower ranks. Pantheon, if this was higher ranks, I'd definitely put this guy like higher in the S tier. But as of now, I'm fine leaving him here. He has a decent. He really doesn't have that bad of a matchup to anyone. I mean, he has a terrible matchup into Ivern. Everything else is like pretty playable, honestly. He's decent at everything. The only thing he lacks is mobility, really. Other than that, like I said, decent at everything. If you're a better jungler than your opponent, and you're playing Pantheon versus like Nocturne or Trundle or whatever, you're probably going to win the game just because this guy is decent at everything, like I said. And then you have Diana. So Diana got buffed her passive damage to monsters. Her passive's damage to monsters has been increased, which does affect her first clear, but it also affects her future clears too. Also, AP items just got buffed, so AP jungler, right? Obviously, it's going to affect her. She's very solid. I think she's also much easier to pilot than the other AP junglers. The other AP junglers start to become a little more niche, whereas Diana feels a lot more similar to traditional junglers. So I think it's a lot more easier to execute with her and win games. Okay, then we have A tier champions. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on all of these, like I said. I'll just explain generally why these guys are here. So these A tier champs, some of them have moved up. Like, for example, Jarvan and Wukong, I think, have moved up to being A tier simply because they're good engaged champions, right? Vi used to be like an S tier, maybe even Z tier pick, right? But she's been nerfed twice in a row now, and she's going to get nerfed in the future patch. So I think there are champions like this that just naturally gain value because Vi is no longer a good pick. And there are also other champions, like, for example, Vi had a good matchup into Evelyn, right? But now that Vi is weaker, something like Evelyn now can be a much better pick. Or Talon as well. So it's just generally champions that have moved up because other champions have become weaker, or some champions like Volibear has yet to move up because I personally think that some of these champs are like Olaf and Volibear is you can get an early game lead because they have very strong fighting and very strong dueling, but being able to close out games with them can be hard. You can apply this logic too with like Evelyn, Fiddlesticks, Elise. They're great. They can get ahead. You could rely on like Fiddlesticks ulti, Evelyn stealth, Elise tower dives. But actually closing out games is not as straightforward as other junglers. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much more into depth about this. If you have further questions on any of these, just feel free to ask me anyway. And then we have the B tier champions. Again, it's just sort of the tier where it's like, there's kind of just a better version of them in the higher tiers. Like, I don't see why you'd want to play Zyra instead of any of the other AP junglers above her, especially because these junglers, like, straight up just have better matchups into her than she does into them anyway. Vi is another example of this. Like, why would you want to play Vi after she's been nerfed 3 times when you have champions like Jarvan and Wukong who have been largely untouched? I mean, yeah, they've been entirely untouched. Yeah, you have, like, for example, Gwen. She's been nerfed a lot, right? Lilia, again, just, I think Lilia's fine, but I just think there are better AP jugglers. Like, for example, Liandry's got nerfed, which was one of her core items, whereas Lichbane, Protobelt, Deathcap all got buffed, which are items that Echo and Evelyn loves to build, right? And again, Zac, it's sort of like, why would you play Zac when Amumu is just a better version? And honestly, why would you even play Amumu when Mundo is just a better version as well, right? Like, obviously, it's not a one-to-one example, but you get the point. And then you have C-tier champions. We're moving more so into, like, one-trick territory here. Like, I don't think Rengar's a C-tier champ if you're a one-trick, right? The problem with these champions is that they're usually pretty bad because they're only good in certain comps. Like, Rengar doesn't like versing a lot of CC. He doesn't really like versing bruisers. He doesn't really like versing tanks, right? So it's like pretty unlikely you're going to get a good Rengar game. Karthus, like, he wants to be the solo AP on his team, right? Like, Fiddlesticks doesn't have to solo AP. He can be a secondary AP because he gets a lot of value from his utility. Because Karthus is just damage. So if you're the second AP and they start building magic resist, you're just a worse version of another AP jungler. Belveth I think is too difficult at lower ranks. Gragas is too niche. Hecarim is just too weak. Lee Sin is too difficult. Same as in Italy. And they're also just not even that strong. Tilly is also too difficult as well. And these champions here, I think not only do they require you to be good at them, but I also think that they're just weak anyway, even if you are good at them. Like, I rarely see these champions in my games, if ever. So I don't think these champions are worth playing at all. Like, these are just going to lose your LP. If you're a Graves one trick, fair enough. Like, you can play him, but I don't see... If you weren't a Graves player or a Yi player or whatever, I don't see why you'd ever want to pick these champions up. With that being said, thank you so much for listening to my video and getting to the end of the tier list if you've managed to do that. I hope this wasn't too long. It's kind of difficult to make a tier list where you want to elaborate, but also not make it too long. So let me know how you guys like this. Do you want it longer? Do you want it more brief? Do you want me to elaborate on more tiers, more champions? And even if you want to just like have a discussion with me about certain placements, for example, like, oh, I think Kindred should be higher because you can build her full crit, for example, or, you know, whatever it may be. Or if you want some more in-depth advice about a champion that I probably didn't go over, you know, maybe you're a Kha'Zix one trick and you want to know about the Kha'Zix build path, stuff like this, feel free to just let me know on Discord. And yeah, until the next video, thank you guys for watching.